took screenshots of the beautiful words that have been spoken, and the beautiful, and here's, you are just at your vocabulary, your descriptive language is beautiful.
Absolutely.
I'm learning to be as descriptive as you, and I don't see as many comments from you, but it's your art that's through there throughout. So your art is speaking for you.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
So that changed me from deciding, okay, I'm going to put text, you know, let each of you pick a text that you want to write down on pages.
Right.
But then I realized we've got to have the art there too, because that's what it's about.
Yeah. Very cool.
So when we get through with your book, then I'm going to get y'all to help me with mine.
Oh dear. And I never realize I'm writing a different word until I proofread. And sometimes I have to proofread 2 or 3 times before I realize that I wrote a completely
That's
different
true.
word.
Even when you proofread it, it's still glossed over, or you thought you still wrote the right word.
Yeah. So
anyway, you see what you want to see.
Yes, exactly. The story behind the piece is that Patsy bought from me a photograph that I had made large and on metal. So I had it printed, it was delivered, Patsy hung it up, and then within a day or two noticed that the printing, the emulsion was chipping off around the edges of the metal. So I called the manufacturer and they asked for pictures, and I sent the pictures, and anyway, long story short, they made good on it, and they printed a new piece, which is now hanging on Patsy's wall. And
First thing I see each morning.
And so I had this piece of metal that I needed to do something with, so I thought at first I would just add collage to the photographic image, and I played around with that for probably 3 weeks, and it never produced anything that I thought was interesting. And so one day it just occurred to me that I needed to just completely forget the image that was there and just collage on top of it. And so I did, and I began to put down a layer, and I did this very slowly, which I think is a breakthrough idea. Is I made this collage not in a day, but in probably a month of adding a layer, and then letting it rest, and then coming back in 2 or 3 days and adding another layer. And I think that was important in a couple of ways. One, it kind of allowed the piece to become what it needed to become, and it also allowed it to dry thoroughly between each layer. And I realized that in the past I had often screwed things up just by being too hasty and trying to add something on top of something that wasn't dry. So it was a learning experience in that regard. And then the other thing that I did, and you guys know that I've been struggling forever with getting my value distributions in my collages to be interesting, so that what you see from far away is interesting, and yet then when you get close to it, you have all kinds of texture and details that's revealed that you didn't maybe didn't appreciate from the distance. And what I had been doing is that most of my collages, when you got far away from them, they just kind of became this sort of monochromatic kind of flatness, because every piece of paper in the collage seemed to have the same value. So, so I worked on that intentionally in this piece. And the other thing is I had been wanting to work on a larger scale for a really long time. And everything I had done prior to this, nothing was bigger than a 1/4 sheet of watercolor paper. So,
Which is 11 by 15.
Yeah, so I was pleased with the outcome because I felt like I executed on the larger scale in a way that worked, and I got my value distributions correct, for lack of a better word, in this piece. So.
You sure did.
Okay, and you've left out an important piece about your text that's underneath, the 3 types of books you use.
The 3 types of text underneath, there are pages from Frank Lloyd Wright,
For music?
architecture book. There are pages from an old Methodist hymnal, and there are pages from an old high school or college calculus book. So this sort of my muses, math, architecture, and music, represented in the piece. And then the colored paper is all paper that I hand printed. So
It's your show, all that energy.
And this probably doesn't need to be recorded, but what you can record it and decide what to do. But there was someone at the library on the Davy Crockett Day, and you know who was there. There were two women with me in that room, and one of them said, "You know, this is what I love about collage. It takes no work or no thought. You just slap it on." And it was like a slap, because she doesn't get it. That after hearing this entire explanation, it's depths and depths and depths of thinking and putting together.
You remember her
the
saying
things that you didn't see the
Yes.
first time.
You talked about color value last time, and I wasn't really looking at color value, but I noticed how you purposely used two different color values. I mean, they look the same, but they're different sheets of paper, I guess.
They are, yeah. And I really worked hard to leave some white, and I struggled with how to introduce the black. And finally, I decided that I would just use the black to emphasize very roughly the grid aspect of the design, and I think that worked. So it gave me the extreme ends of the value spectrum, and then I had the papers in between. And I did try to pay attention to, I realized that I have a very distinct palette, and those palettes are all midtones. So I had to really work at finding some.
This is not what you usually do. That's what's,
Yeah.
it's so stunning.
Nothing wrong with that, but I see your pieces mostly as a musical piece, Awanda, and I'm glad you mentioned about saving the whites, because they say that in music, it's the pauses in between notes that make the music coherent, or gives it the beauty. And for me, the white spaces are those pauses between notes,
Right.
you know?
What paper did you use?
It's all kinds of different paper, because you know I had that huge box of all those scraps, and I did not print any new paper for this piece. I just rummaged through that box of scraps.
But it looks very like it's extremely thin paper, not
Some-
rice paper thin, but
Well, if you get close to it, you can tell that some of it is that Graphics 360 bin fang, which is very, very thin, and then some of it's cardstock. So you get a very minimal but apparent relief. You know, you get some of that paper is actually standing off the surface. You know, it has enough thickness to actually come off the surface a little bit, and some of it is just very flat. Photographs printed on a metal substrate. This is the first piece of collage that I've had that is that large. And I have a gallery, Sparrow's Gallery in Denison has my work, but they haven't seen this yet, so I'm hoping that they'll like it and keep it. But it's different from what I've done, so they may say, there is at the library right now an exhibit that was organized by Ginger Cook, and she asked Patsy and I to join her. And it is an exhibit of collage, and it is collage that was based on the checkout cards that the libraries used to use checkout cards that you would pull out and write your name on, and that's how they kept up with the who had what on loan. And that's all been done away with and replaced by computers. So the Honey Grove Library allowed us to take away a lot of those old cards and the old little packet, what do you call those, the little jackets that were inside the book that you would slide the card into. So we had all these pieces of kind of that old loaning system, and we used those pieces in the collage that we built. And we built three very different, we all just went off with from the same starting point, and built individual pieces, and they're very, very different, but I think that the exhibit as a whole is really effective. I think it's worth seeing, and I don't say that because I'm in it. I just think it turned out really well.
Wanda did a book based on her experience of where reading has led her, and what the first book she remembered, and then she put passages in, and she's got the little what did you call them, packets where you can pull out an explanation, and so it's not an accordion book.
It's a stiff leaf binding, which is a form of accordion. Yeah.
And then we just did a project, but Ginger put the whole piece, brought it all together by collaging her pieces of work and putting an explanation. Because to me, as old as I am, I know what those are. But many people are going into the library now, they're going, what were these used for? And did they come with collage already on them when they were in the book?
Yeah, wow. Interesting that people would even imagine that. Strange.
Yes.
Days.
That's remarkable.
We set up, the three of us, Ginger, Patsy, and I, the Davy Crockett room with poster boards and glue and scissors and all kinds of pieces of paper from magazines and just scraps of paper that we had, and encouraged people as they were visiting the Quanah Parker exhibit that's in that room right now, and as they were visiting Davy Crockett Days, encouraged them to come in and collage. And some did. I noticed that some of those community collage pieces had new things glued to them, but it looked like our visitors were very timid about actually.
The gift is not art. I'm working on it, and these two ladies are helping me, but I feel in my heart that my gift and my passion is my photography. And we met, and they led me into a direction to embrace what artistic ability I may or may not have, and embrace it. And I have, and so they have carried me way down the road to art, the vocabulary of art, the techniques of art, the different types of art, and it has made my life so full the past 2 years. I cannot express the gratitude having fellow artists. And we never have a meeting without Balan crying.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah, because it comes from the heart. The tears are from here.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that. See, I'm so happy to hear that, Patsy. What did they say? If in your lifetime you have made one person's life better, you have lived well.
Oh, yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
You made my life worthwhile.
And I'm going to go ahead and tell the story of how, then I'll leave this to Balan, but how I met Wanda and how I met Balan. I had retired from a school district position in Frisco and had come to work at the library part-time and wanted to start a photography class or a photography club. So I put something out in the newspaper, and she's heard this 100 times, and a woman from Wyndham said, well, I can teach an photography class. I didn't know who it was, and I thought, it's a cat woman in Wyndham who takes Polaroids is going to come in. So she came in and she sat down very professionally, and she opened up her iMac book, and her photography is gorgeous. We have not even touched on her photography. And so she began teaching photography classes, which many of us took over until COVID came through. And so she's created many photographers. So working at the library, Balan and Robert came in one day, and they were very quiet, and you don't remember? Then I can make up any story I want, y'all will believe it. But one of my first stories I remember about them is that they were going to walk from here to the library one day. Which is what, 3, 4, 5 miles?
It's a good
6
way.
miles, 4.6 miles.
4.6 miles. So they got partway there and they changed their mind. So they've driven to the library ever since. But that has become, now it is Robert's second home, and it has become both of their second homes.
Indeed, it is.
And the library, if we ask them to buy a book, they'll buy a book for the public, and we share with people about it. So that's how the three of us came to be, and how we ever came this close, I cannot tell you.
Well, and I can add a little bit to that idea, because I came back to I grew up in Fannin County, but I came back in 2008. And one of the very first things I did is I went to I don't think it was a Master Gardener's, but it was some kind of gardening, sustainable farming, farmer's market kind of a meeting. And Robert and Belon were there, so I met them at that meeting. But then time rocked on. They were people that I knew of Belon. I'd seen Belon's wonderful art, but you know, they were acquaintances, I would say, or neighbors, people that I knew of. And then my grandson started taking an art class at the library that Belon was teaching. So once again, you know, I see Belon, I interact with Belon, I bring my grandson every week to art class, I sit there and doodle while he's in class. But we still had no idea that we were
not listening to the muses.
Right, and we just, you know, we hadn't recognized one another yet. And then, was it Ginger that wanted originally the watercolor?
Oh,
that
yes.
mentioned that she would like to have a watercolor class. And I said, well, I know someone who does watercolors. I'll contact her and see if she will teach a class. So I contacted Belon, and we came out one day.
It's painting those old photographs.
Yes, that's what she wanted to do. She
Okay.
wanted to paint the old photographs. So we came out, Patsy and Ginger and I, to talk to Belon about whether or not she would teach a class. And she agreed to do it, and then for whatever reason, Ginger dropped out. It didn't work out for her to join us. But we started coming out for watercolor classes with Belon, and that's when, for me, that's when it all came together so powerfully, and this group of queens happened.
Yes. And I think that we are three who don't embrace people's friendship easily. They have to earn the friendship, and we have to earn their trust, and they've got to earn mine. And it's taken us several years to get to this place.
Yep.
Beautifully said, Patsy.
Yes.
Beautifully
To
said.
work on it. But the pure joy is photographing people, nature, the changing of this area right now because of the two lakes. And I'm documenting that for myself and my kids and grandkids and anybody who'd like to know what it was like before.
Basically, you had the same pattern. These were the illustrations Patsy and Wanda were talking about earlier. They're helping me to figure out how to make it into a book form. Wanda and Patsy are more savvy about checking online for all these different materials that we thought might be good paper for creating that book. It just so happened. How did it come about when that matriarchal root we started talking about it, and we started thinking about, you know, creating something along that line.
Right.
And so this is what came out for me. Started just, I mean, this was taken out of an old photograph of my mother when she was young. And so I thought I would like to do this for my granddaughter, so that she can also get to know a little bit of her great grandma, and so that's that part of that story that Patsy was able to capture.
Tell us about your goal for, as you work on these, you have a goal for your work that you haven't mentioned about that you want to become less precise and more and softer in your illustrations.
Yeah.
For this particular project.
Yeah,
anyway.
because as artists, we talked about it. You know, we tend to we tend to keep doing things that we thought would surely give us the result that we wanted because we're just so familiar doing it. And I thought I would like to get away from my comfort zone. And my comfort zone, just because I started out as an illustrator in advertising, has always been crisp and precise. And it's only when I learned about watercolor how valuable the blurring lines are, the soft edges. And that is what I'm trying to teach myself. And here is the very first one, and it's okay. I am learning about the paper, and because every different paper, different watercolor paper, the surfaces also yield different effects. And I'm learning that this particular one is more, it gives more of a hot press effect because the pigment just stays on the surface. In fact, it is so forgiving that if I make mistake, I just scrub it off with paper, with water and brush, and it goes away. And I think I am a little bit happier with this second one just because I'm starting to be able to soften my edges. And then I do not know. Oh, Wanda introduced a fabulous artist to the table one Art Friday. His name is Wole Lagunju, and he's a Nigerian artist, and his background is also as an illustrator. And he had the most fabulous portraits of women from his country. The ethnicity that he was able to portray in those portraits just took our breaths away. And this is like my diluted version of the inspiration that I pick up from this particular artist. But then I've always been also fascinated with the work of Alphonse Mucha or Mucha. I don't even know how to pronounce it properly. But he was an artist from the Art Nouveau era. And beautiful, intricate lines, and this is where that particular inspiration or manner of thinking went.
Is there one more? Don't you have one more?
Yeah, there's one, but I showed it to you last week, but I
we
never
loved
did
it.
touch it.
I know, but I think that we'd like to see it again
Okay.
because you're getting to where you want to be.
Yeah, okay, let me go. Last one, and not the last one, but the more recent one that I haven't worked on. This time I thought I would like to present my mother like a tree, and the leaves I feel like would be symbolic of those that came away from her, like a tree that drops her leaves and go back. The leaves that go back into the soil and then spring up again. She raised 6 of us, and I think 3 are gone. No, maybe 2. Shoot, I cannot think straight right now. But anyway, so this is where this particular portrait is going story-wise, is what I'm trying to say.
Her eyes are lovely. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Have you thought about what we talked about last week? About erasing some of the lines?
I did. That's the thing I'm learning, Patsy. The pencil mark can't be erased once you put the pigment on top, unless I really scrub hard. It's like the pigments had been a varnish over it.
Right,
I tried erasing, but the pencil won't go
That's
away.
lesson learned.
Lesson learned.
Yeah.
Yep. So that means it almost, if you wanted that softer edge, you'd have to have the drawing underneath your paper on a light box so that you can see the pencil marks, but they're not on the paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, I had to squeeze it in because it was a very powerful epiphany for me. Now that I am pursuing this for my mother, that I said, oh, she's still teaching me.
Yes. Oh yeah, you spoke about that last week. Yes.
And then, of course, we have our eagle here,
Yes.
who is our spiritual guide
Yes.
with his flute music.